So would you believe me if I told you I currently own 4 road bikes? Yeah, you heard that right, 4. That is far too many bikes that I need. 3 is plenty, and maybe even someday I can get down to 2 road bikes, which is still more than I actually need as a casual cyclist. Now, I've recently decided to put one of my bikes for sale online. So in this video, we're going to go over my thought process and just my overall opinions on why I decided to sell the bike that I actually currently have for sale. So first, inventory check of those bikes. I currently have a Wabi Classic in Midnight Blue that I bought in 2018. I have a Wabi Thunder that you're seeing right here in this nice desert turquoise. I've had this bike for probably almost 2 years now. Behind me, you can see I have a Giant TCR Advanced Pro Zero Disc Di2 in a beautiful chameleon Neptune blue colorway, and I've also got my all black Trek Domani SL6, which has disc brakes, mechanical Ultegra, and is a great bike overall. Now on paper, the Wabi Classic, which this is the Thunder, not the Classic by the way, on paper the Wabi Classic actually is the least versatile, least useful bike. It can only fit 32mm tires, but they get pretty close to rubbing on the brakes. And it has rim brakes, meaning that it's pretty bad in the rain. It scrapes away at your wheels. And also it being a single speed means that it is severely limited if you want to do a longer day out in the hills and just tackle a lot of terrain. But the crazy thing about the Wabi is every single time I ride that bike, even if I am tackling a bunch of hills, it always ends up riding amazingly. It exceeds my expectations. I never really feel like I need more when I ride that bike, which really has me questioning if I could just get by with that one bike. So pretty insane how the least useful, least versatile bike that I have actually is one of the most fun, if not the most fun bicycle that I own. Now my all black Trek Domani, I actually did plan on selling it quite a while ago, but I really got a chance to ride it a lot this past summer and I really enjoyed it. Take one of those heavy endurance bikes, throw on a set of nice carbon wheels with some nice race tires and a 30mm width. That is what I actually like to ride. It really just transforms that bike and makes it feel pretty racy and pretty aggressive, which was something I was definitely overlooking. And the fact that you can run 38mm wide tires and tackle some serious gravel on that bike means that that bike is like a Swiss Army knife, jack of all trades, whatever you want to call it. Plus, it being black, it being more robust than the bike behind me, which we'll talk about next, and it just being a good overall, well-rounded, all-road bike means that the Domani, while not perfect, is a keeper as well. The bike behind me is my Giant TCR. I was set on selling this bike just because now that I feel like I am perfectly satisfied with my Trek Domani, there is some redundancy between this bike and that bike. If you missed that video, it'll be linked right up there or the other side, I can never remember. The reason why I decided the Domani is a better bike for me just comes with the fact that although the TCR and the Domani are both carbon, the TCR has carbon handlebars, which are more prone to damage if the bike just falls over, even if it was just leaning up against the wall like it is right now. It has electronic shifting, the last generation, so if anything breaks or malfunctions, it's going to be a lot harder and a lot more expensive to find an actual replacement part and purchase it. And overall, it's a longer bike. It doesn't fit as wide tires, so this bike for a casual cyclist like myself is just not the bike for me anymore. If I was racing, absolutely it'd be the #1 choice. However, at this point, just is not this bike. Now, what about the bike that I'm actually holding? This is the Wabi Thunder. I really have enjoyed this bike. However, this bike can sometimes really fall short of my expectations, and it really just all comes down to the brakes and the tires on this bike. I typically ride these bikes on the road 99% of the time, so I don't need big tires. And every time I try to put big tires on the Wabi Thunder, it just feels very underwhelming. And these brakes, I had cantilever brakes, then I switched to V brakes, and then I switched back to cantilevers, back to V brakes. The brakes on this bike, the wide tire rim brake options, the mini V brakes that I have, they have just been the most frustrating brake that I've ever had, more than my hydraulic disc brakes on the TCR, on my Trek Domani, or even on my very first road bike, which is my Felt VR30, which, by the way, I still have, but that one is kind of just tucked away in a basement in my mom's house. The reason why I'm bringing up the frustrations of the Wabi Thunder are because I started to have a bit of a change of heart and thought, if I'm only going to go down to 3 bikes, wouldn't it make sense to have 2 bikes that have disc brakes and variable gears, since you can tackle pretty much any hill that you want as long as your fitness is up to snuff. If you happen to get caught in a downpour, you're not going to have to deal with riding rim brakes in the rain, which for the most part is totally fine, but I don't like the noises they make when they're dirty and then you got to clean them constantly. I'd much rather ride a disc brake bike if the ground's wet, even in light rain. I know the disc brakes howl like crazy, but I'd rather listen to that howl than that screeching noise of dirty rim brakes. While I do enjoy single speed bikes, they're robust, they're strong, they're cheap, they're easy to maintain and cheaper to maintain, they are a pretty big commitment. And if you're like me, your life does not revolve around cycling. So let's say you take a 2-month break because it's super cold in the winter like it is time of filming this video. Getting back onto a geared road bike that's actually going to help you pace yourself up the hills versus a bike where you're just stuck in one gear like a single speed is going to be a little bit easier if you are just trying to get your fitness back. This is where I started to think, why would I actually go to 2 less useful bikes, the Wabi Thunder, the Wabi Classic, and the Trek Domani? Why would I have 2 single-speed steel rim brake bikes, which are very limiting, and only 1 super versatile bike? Doesn't it make more logical sense to go with 2 geared disc brake equipped road bikes, which are overall just more versatile bikes, and get rid of the single speed that I actually can sometimes feel is a bit underwhelming? Well, a few weeks ago, I actually set out to take the Giant TCR for a casual ride around the neighborhood. I strapped my shoes on, I just had a pair of jeans on, just pretty much what you see right now is what I was riding in, except I had to wear cycling shoes since I do have cycling pedals. I have mountain bike pedals on the TCR currently. And I was getting downstairs, I was getting on the bike, I was feeling good. I said, this makes so much more sense. I don't have to struggle up the hills. I can just shift into my lowest gear. I can fit slightly bigger tires and not worry about grinding away my wheels. All these good things were entering my head. But after just a few minutes of taking the TCR out for that test ride, I was very quickly reminded of one main reason why I decided to initially part with the TCR over the Wabi Thunder or the Domani or the Wabi Classic. This bike is just too long for me. It is actually a size large or a 58, while my Trek Domani is a size 56, and the Wobbies are size 55 centimeter top tube. Even though a bike like this has gears and disc brakes, which can help you if you're just getting back into it, get that fitness back up, or if you get caught in the downpour, what really hurts is if you don't ride for a few weeks or even a few months, you're just not going to be used to that super stretched out aero position anymore. So I turned around, brought this bike back into the apartment, changed into my regular shoes, and then I hopped on my Wabi Thunder just to do sort of a compare contrast, ride the 2 of them back to back. And yes, all that logic does apply here. When I was riding up the mini hills, I did have to work a lot harder, or at least a little bit harder, than just downshifting on a geared bike like the TCR. And also with this bike, I just get some really nasty brake shudder in the front. I've tried just about everything. I can't get rid of it. However, when it came to basic accelerating, just basic overall riding and being comfortable on the bike, this bike being a 55 centimeter instead of a 58 centimeter like the TCR, overall just felt a lot more comfortable. Even though it does have a pretty aggressive stance, it's just nice that it's not super stretched out and I can pull my shoulders back a little bit more. So while the Wabi Thunder can be more underwhelming than the Wabi Classic, and those front brakes, that fork shudder can just drive me absolutely insane, overall it is the better bike for me than the Giant TCR, just because it is a smaller bike and fits me better. Now add to the fact that to buy a brand new Giant TCR spec similar to this one, you're looking at spending $6,000 or more, but if you're looking at a bike like this Wabi Thunder, you're looking at about $1,100 or $1,200. Just means that this bike is not only stronger, it's also a lot more affordable. And for me, that is huge. I've actually taken this bike and locked it up in Manhattan just for like an hour or 2 before. I use some pretty beefy locks, but it is a lot easier to digest locking up a bike that costs a fraction of the cost of a nice fancy schmancy carbon fiber race bike. Adding to the fact that an all steel bike like this with no carbon components is going to be miles better when it comes to durability when compared to a full carbon bike like the Giant TCR just means that this bike is not only cheaper, more strong, cheaper to maintain, easier to maintain. The replacement cost is going to be significantly lower, so overall it's just an easier bike to live with right now. So this was an interesting thought exercise that I did, and I'm glad that I did it since I just got reminded that my initial idea of parting ways with the Giant TCR was actually the correct idea all along, for the main reason of this bike is just too big and I feel too stretched out on it. Now I did have this TCR listed on bicycle.com. Someone actually recently purchased it. When I'm done filming with this video, I do have to start packing this up into a bike box and get ready to ship it out to the new owner. But if I'm being totally honest, I'm still not 100% on the Wabi Thunder, and maybe if the TCR fit me a little bit better, it would have won out and I would have ended up keeping that bike, the TCR, over the Thunder. So I'm not really sure what I'm going to do with the Thunder yet. I'm going to give it a little bit more of a chance. I'm going to put some skinnier road tires on it, probably about 30 or 32s, just because there's a little bit more give compared with 28s, even though 28s, the narrower tires are faster than wider tires, even if we're talking about 28s versus 32 millimeter tires. I'm kind of over the whole front brake thing. It seems like no matter what I do, I can't get rid of that front brake shutter. When I get done riding the Thunder versus my Wabi Classic, I'm always a lot more satisfied with my Classic. It's just a simpler experience. You pull the brakes, they work. It's just a little bit faster. It actually is a little bit more forgiving. Believe it or not, I would think that an all-road bike would be less jarring. So I'm not really sure what I'll do with this one. I could relegate it to a nice commuter or lockup bike just for those couple of times that I do need to lock it up or I want to ride my bike instead of taking the subway here in New York City, just because subway's been kind of crazy lately. Or I may end up actually repurposing it. Maybe I'll try to move the parts over to a different frame if I can figure something like that out. Again, I'm not totally sure. These are all new ideas that I've just recently had. So I hope you enjoyed it, hope you had fun, and I hope you learned something. And as always, thanks for watching.